Hey, what's up? Sorry about the screen resolution looking funky, but for this little video here, it shouldn't be a big deal. Anyway, this video is about this new Joe Rogan clip. We're currently at this point in history, and it's about dealing with the homeless problem, most especially, I guess you could say in LA, but it almost sounds like potentially on a nationwide level. I don't think this guy's got a whole lot of traction. This race in for mayor in LA, I'm guessing will be like a smaller scale version of what happened with the state. You know, whenever you see a lot of diversity in the candidates, it's usually because it's like this tactic that gets played out over and over in California, especially where what I think happens, my opinion is that they uh they do that and it sort of like waters down the selection, and it gets everybody to where it's like they're either too confused or they feel like they want to latch onto their little niche candidate, you know? So it makes it so that anybody who has any sort of signal of being like a lead horse, obviously the whole Gavin Newsom thing in California was a perfect example how the recalls and stuff just didn't work against him. So that's what they do, because if they just had like a couple solid candidates, then people are going to vote on party lines, da 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 da, all the typical stuff that's what they do with these elections. They always try and do something. They always try and put some slant in there, right? So anyway, that's what I kind of see going on with this mayoral race, I guess you'd say. Anyway, just like Joe Rogan claims about himself about how he's a complete idiot, I am too. So I hope you'll agree on both accounts. So what this guy's doing is it's kind of strange because I just heard through the grapevine that Joe Rogan wasn't going to have politicians on his show that were like running for office or anything, and then this guy appears on here. But I'm not surprised. Um, I'm going to try and present this mostly unbiased, mostly kind of neutral, but obviously, if you've read my little, I guess my notes are cut off on your screen, but there's a bias. I'm not going to lie. You know what I mean? I want to say up front that I think maybe I consider the positives as well and all that, and looking at things from a neutral point, strip in whatever this guy's ideas and motives might not be, and like what are the potential solutions, all that kind of a thing. But I think there's plenty of that rhetoric out there right now. So what I'm proposing is I am going to put in hopefully slightly academic argument. I don't have a whole lot of sources or anything like that, but just kind of leaning in that direction, pissing in that wind, so to speak. Uh, and what I'm going to present is just my sort of paranoid take, because I think that's what we need. We need to consider, especially considering what happened the past 2 years. And while that's still at the very front of our mind, to be proactive and not just turning right around and repeating that mistake, especially when you consider what was set up. You know what I mean? All these political things are set up 99% of the time. I mean, if you don't know that, you're living in professional wrestling world, like jumping off the ropes and whatever and slamming chairs against your opponent kind of thing. Like that's cool, you know? But if you believe that that is like not staged, then I'm sorry. I'm glad, kick back and enjoy the show. Like I still love you, right? But if you realize that that's staged, not that the people aren't good looking and talented and all that kind of stuff, but we realize it's staged, then we know there's a motive behind everything. Just like in that WWF, WWE, whatever wrestling, we know that pretty much every one of those moves, more or less, is planned out for the most part. You could say the majority of it's scripted, right? Maybe there's a little bit of some play in there, and that's the way I see politics. So here goes another one of those patterns. This guy's a perfect open example, a little bit rushed to the spotlight with his ideas, which I am ready to split the hairs on. Thank you for still hanging in there with me. Here we go. starting at 5 seconds into this episode of Joe Rogan here, we have the wacky and unstructured presentation of numbers. And what I mean by that is when you go to make like any type of a business presentation, which a lot of these people running for, a political office, they tend to have either legal, like as in being a lawyer or something, or business experience, or two popular kinds of fields. Either way, when you present an argument, which a lawyer should be capable of doing, or a business person, the idea is that you present that argument very structurally. You know what I mean? When it comes down to numbers, certain facts and evidence like that, you need to have a very structured plan. Otherwise, you can get to like the first kind of tiers. You might, as a startup company or whatever, you might get a little bit of funding. There's no black and white answers to things. But once people really start moving up the ranks to any degree, they really have to have that down. They have to have that executive summary, they have to have their elevator pitch, they have to even have a complete business plan for any reputable type of entity to invest in them, right? This guy doesn't do that. And the way that he presents his numbers, another thing you don't want to do in this type of a situation where you really want people to buy in on, kind of it's sort of a long term, I feel like, we're talking years. You don't want to do trickery with people. Anything you lay out should be clear. So these numbers shouldn't give this impression like they're giving to Joe, like they gave to me the first time I watched it. So here you go. Like I said, it's front loaded. Apologize, whatever. Here we go.
And includes the 44,000.
Oh, okay.
And San Francisco has somewhere between.
Oh, I have to apologize. Apparently it jumped forward. It's supposed to start at 5 seconds.
How that works.
Okay.
So, first of all, what are the numbers? What's the number of homeless people in Los Angeles currently? Because Los Angeles is the big problem. If you'll be the governor, you're going to have to deal with, obviously, San Francisco is the other big problem. San Diego, much less so, right?
I'll tell you the official numbers, but they're wrong because they're 2.5 years old, and they were probably undercounts in the year 2020. But it's
so they're 2.5 years old, which would actually place them in 2019, like fall of 2019. Then he starts talking about the year 2020, which is a little bit fishy, So maybe let's give him the benefit of the doubt, say the numbers were from fall of 2019 and they were presented in 2020 and then they were under then, whatever.
It's in LA County, 60,000 homeless. In LA City, 44,000. All of California, 116,000 unsheltered, meaning outside in tents. 160,000 total, meaning unsheltered and in shelters.
How is it 100,000 in Los Angeles County and Los Angeles City, but in only another 16,000 the rest of the state?
No, 60,000 in LA County.
Right, but you said 40,000 in LA proper.
Oh yeah, sorry, but that's the 60,000 includes the 44,000.
Oh, okay.
And San Francisco has somewhere between, I would say, officially it has 8,000 total homeless, but I think it's much.
Okay, I have to apologize. On that rewatch right there, I feel like he didn't do the numbers too crazy. But it's something definitely to be careful with, of course, right? Because people like me and Joe took it wrong. So I took it like offensively. And I've watched this a couple times, or a few times by now. So I really just had to sit there and shut my mind up and pay attention to him and really lock in. So that was my bad. But like I said, that's something to be very careful about. Okay, let's get up here to 232. There's plenty more. That's it's not like that sweeps my argument off its feet by any means whatsoever. And in this guy's defense, I appreciate him putting himself out there and flapping the jaw about it. Okay, here we go. They're not poor people. So this is sort of like in my opinion, the whole what some people call the white liberal savior, that comes in and whatever. I start getting those kind of vibes, and he's like, "Oh, they're not poor people; they're drug users," and da da da. And that's very true, and especially in big cities like LA and stuff like that. That's probably at least half or more of the time, and it happens so much, this so-called open drug scene, that it might feel like it's the vast majority of people, but I myself have been a homeless person, and I'll tell you what, that if anything, being homeless for me was not an enabling situations to be a substance abuser. So that I was a homeless person for years, and I stayed at camps, and I stayed on my own, and I stayed in town and out of town, and I tried all the variations. I even was homeless going to college, in shelters, not in shelter, whatever, like I've done it. And so I can truly say I've walked miles in those shoes. And I've met with people like this all across the board. Anyway, so yes, they are poor people who couldn't pay rent. I was one of them. So to say, even if the vast majority of them, even in LA or something, aren't, that to discount the people, you're talking about, they build it up to like military style action of like, basically imposing martial law on the homeless people effectively. Just listen.
Would never go and talk to homeless people or much less interview them.
Really? Have you done that?
They look at those tents and they go, they're poor people. That's like how the mentality works, as opposed to like, no, they became addicted to hard drugs. They stopped working. They overstayed their welcome with friends and family. They usually often stole money or lied or cheated from the.
So he's just offering a counter argument, right? I mean, one side, it's two extreme sides, like, oh, they're just people on hard luck, right? And then it's like, no, no. And then he comes in like, I'm right, right? Which I'm kind of doing right now, but I'm saying I'm biased and not necessarily right. But yeah, of course, he comes in with the extreme, no, no, they often stole and did drugs and all this stuff. And it's like, okay. And it is a fallacy to say the truth is in the middle, right? To just say the truth is in the middle. The truth could be at an extremity. But most likely, the truth is not in an extremity, right? So most likely there is a gray area, or there's just speckles of outliers that should count.
Folks they're staying with, and then they were finally kicked out onto the street, and then they go just live in the open drug markets, and the open drug markets become the open drug scenes. One of the characters in San
So as a person, I tend to be more proactive than reactive. I think these people stepping into the reactive stuff fits the whole Hegelian dialectic model, which I'll get into a little bit in a little bit, but why not be proactive? Stop this reactive politics and be proactive, which can be just as scary too, done the wrong way. But look at, okay, what about the people who do fall on quote unquote so-called hard luck? What can you do to prevent them from slipping into this scene? Because you either have to go to the homeless shelter processing style facilities, or you got to go to the streets and fend for yourself in that regard. So just trying to put food for thought out there.
Francisco, he was like, when we were walking through the Tenderloin, which
I
is
love that
like
San
Skid Row of San
Francisco.
Francisco, he goes, yeah, that's the
Think it was an
doorwell
accident.
I used to sleep in because I didn't want to walk 5 blocks away to the shelter. I wanted to be right where the drug dealers were.
And that's also the doorwell somebody used to sleep in to avoid getting saturated by the rain. It's not always a drug addict.
So part of it is that you see the other thing is that like the people often in the open drug scene might not be homeless in the sense that they might actually have places to stay, but what you'll see when you watch the open drug scenes is that people will come on their bikes or they'll walk there, they'll buy the drugs from the dealers,
This is all very true.
and they'll use them right there. They're in such a hurry to get their fix, they'll buy the fentanyl and meth and they'll just sit right there, and then over a period of time, they're just there all the time with their little foil and light.
And this is where you end up with the bad parts of town, right?
The meth and fentanyl and smoking it, and they just become catatonic.
They'll herd the people to one edge of town when this starts happening in the bigger cities, and then that becomes the bad part of town. And just as often that used to be, so many decades ago or whatever, a really nice part of town.
So we have these numbers. Let's just, whatever the number is in LA, 100,000. Let's say 100,000. Let's start with LA. What is available in terms of shelter, and do you make new buildings? Do you buy buildings?
Yes.
Both.
Yep. And it's not clear that I'm not sure yet. We have a working group on this, and so we're looking at this. It's not clear where you start. One argument is that you start where you have the strongest local political support. So there is a mayoral election in LA. We'll see what happens. But for example, let's say the Sacramento mayor is like Michael, we love your whole agenda. Let's start in Sacramento. So because I'm what I know, what I feel very strongly about is that success breeds success. So we want to start somewhere where we get some good outcomes, where we see a big difference.
These are the things that people always want to do, right? Yeah, I mean, if you just apply it to business or whatever, they want to start somewhere and they want to do, we want to have big success. Of course, right? That's what you want to do. But where is the clear plan? Where is this clear plan? And when people have clear plans, it usually is too narrow, right? There's not enough support. They're not with the political thing, it comes down to that money bag game where like you have to entertain the and I don't like it, but you have to entertain financial support, right? To support yourself. And not only that, I mean even if you take yourself out of the equation, right? You're going to work for $1 a year, all that just as a total public servant. If you do not pander to those companies, to a particular handful of companies or interests or whatever, they're going to pander to people to take you out, you know, whether that's a media cancellation or otherwise. Like they'll do whatever they have to do, they'll be like, here, you can take this money and be rich off your ass, reinvest it, whatever, and live happily as like some form of nobility or something effectively, and everybody else can just get screwed, right? It's like the same thing when a lot of times at big companies when they push insurance policies on the floor workers, the operational employees, they'll go, and I've worked for this is firsthand. This is not secondhand, like whatever taught to me stuff. Uh, you're down there on the floor and they come and push an insurance policy on you. And I've had it happen to me. I was at one particular company. I'm not going to say their name. I want to. They're gone now, but they were big for what they did. And they came down one day. I don't know if it was a surprise or not. Maybe they had notified us a week before or something that was coming up. But anyway, to the way I felt surprised by it. And they said, hey, you got to come down and fill out this. There's these people here, and you need to come fill out this insurance and get on or otherwise you need to prove that you have your own insurance. And I was still a little new to the state. I'm in Oregon right now. I came from California, and at that time, and I wasn't completely familiar with how stuff worked and everything. And I was at that point was just somebody trying to keep a job, trying to support a household, that type of a thing, not trying to create a lot of friction. And I did not know if my son had medical insurance. I honestly just didn't know like what the status was, right? That was something that my wife at the time was more caught up with when than I was. You know what I mean? We had split up our responsibilities, and I don't, that's not an excuse. Like I feel like in hindsight I definitely should have known and that type of a thing. But at the time we just divided the responsibilities, and each person handled their share of that pie, like to the effect that the other person over time just wasn't aware of the details anymore. If somebody started paying a particular bill, whatever. So, and plus we had been talking about getting our son on insurance, whatever at the time. So I didn't know if that had taken place or not. So to be on the safe side, and plus with the pressure and everything, I just signed him up for the company plan, put him and I on it. I knew that my wife was covered, and if I remember correctly, it was some years ago now. But I did everything like that. If she wasn't covered, then she was on there too. But I'm almost certain it was just me and him. And all of a sudden, it was like $40 out of every paycheck for like, which I think I was every 2 weeks I was getting paid. Maybe if I remember correctly, maybe it was every week, but probably every 2 weeks. And I don't know. Whatever it was a dent for what I was making at that time because I wasn't making, I don't even think I was making $15 an hour at that time. I don't remember. Something probably 10 to 15, somewhere in that range. So it's nothing, right? But the cost of living wasn't super high either. I mean, I think at that exact moment, my rent was $400, which was cheap for the time. But, you know, uh, now in this location you can't find anything going for under 1,200 probably, or you definitely not under 1,000. studio or anything. But anyway, that's just to say that like that sort of scales what I see this stuff applying to is where like the people up on top. What happened there was the HR was effectively pushed. I found out later. I dug into it, looked into it, whatever, as the years went by, and started to realize what happens is HR gets offered this really killer package for insurance that it's just like you're crazy not to take it, right? And there's only so many people in HR and, in those tiers in the desk jobs, right? Well, then you get down to the operational employees on the floor, they all get the shit packages. And so the insurance is going to win because they're going to, you know what I mean? It's the same thing with the politicians and all that kind of stuff to the masses. It's just a pattern that if you don't see it, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? Like,
In a pretty short period of time, by which I mean months, not years, that it's humane, that we are using our emergency powers the least amount necessary because we want to protect human rights and individual.
so here he goes. We're going to talk about months, not years. We want to protect human rights. When were we talking about weeks, not years? 2 weeks to flatten the curve? And did that not pan out to 2 years? Let's see if this guy ever changes his narrative to 2 years from this months and humane thing. Just in this show.
Rights, which are now being violated. We want to protect those rights. We want to limit the powers that the governor has because the governor has.
He honestly, I mean, this is just my analysis, but he's looking down as if he's like reciting this list. Like I went over these bullet points before. I need to remember to say these, okay? And check.
Absolutely extraordinary powers in disaster situations, which is what this is. You get success. Now, you get people into shelter, you get people into rehabs, you get some people into psych.
Maybe even has some note cards with some bullet. I don't know. Whatever.
Hospitals. You might actually get people to go back home to Kentucky or Colorado or wherever they came from. But I think it's also fair to assume.
I like how whenever he goes outside of the state, he kind of like paints this picture of like Kentucky, Colorado, like that farm people send their dogs to like run around on when their dogs disappear, like one of those kind of places. Or whatever we offer in the city.
That some amount of those so-called unsheltered homeless addicts and mentally ill people will go somewhere else in the state where they're not being required.
Okay, so-called politician. This is it right here. This is that. I'm not trying to judge like liberal, conservative or anything, but like I said, what people often label as the white liberal savior, cis male white liberal savior guy. Like, really, dude? Not the right guy to present this stuff, but at least it makes it more transparent for those who kind of are like a little bit in the know, I feel like.
To stay in the shelters because of course you've got to enforce the no camping. You got to enforce the camping ban. Otherwise you destroy your cities, which are being destroyed now.
So there it is, no camping, right? I lived in a city like that. This city that I live in right now, they had a no camping policy, a strict no camping policy that was you get one warning and then you get arrested. Like you get one warning, you get put on a list. If you are caught camping within the city limits, sleeping in your car, anything, automatic arrest, right? Citation, all that. Well, they were doing it. They were full on enforcing it. And I was living in my car, camping, like just sleeping in my car, not like putting a tent outside of it or anything. I'm totally the type of person who like goes in late, waits till after dark. Like, so during the summer time, that would be pretty late, right? Going after dark, just slip into a spot, not like right in front of somebody's house, like try and do, go a little bit to like some place that's still being developed, like closest thing like catty corner to like a house, whatever. Like just, I don't know, you probably, especially these days, you probably see with the van life people and then now like so much more homelessness that you probably see like what a lot of options are and stuff. But anyway, I would do it really low key to where anybody who's like really paying attention would be like, okay, I see what that guy's probably napping it up in his car at night, so I could get up and go to work the next day and stuff. And I was doing that. Well, sure enough, in 1 degree weather, my car door wouldn't even shut all the way. It wasn't like the ugliest looking car, but once you got up close and started kicking the tires, you realized it wasn't a perfect gym. But anyway, I would have to like tie my door shut, like to the steering wheel or something. I can't quite remember. I'd have to like pull it shut because it wouldn't shut all the way. It's like 1 degree weather in the middle of winter in Oregon at that year, and freaking I get the knock on the window of the police officer telling me, you're camping in this car, and if we find you again, you're gonna get arrested. So then my only choice then, in like I said, that car that you could literally kick the tires and be like, whoa, dude. Um, it had like it had some stuff that was kind of sketch wrong. But anyway, I had to start driving out of town, and so I would drive just outside of the city limits and into the woods and turn. I found this little spot I could turn and pull and park just right for a car to fit, and I would do that and then drive into town and go to work. Well, then my battery started dying in my car and stuff. And like, anyway, I don't want to go off too long about it, but it was just this chain reaction of events to where it's like, I just remember thinking like, I don't even need this car if I just had like a few just basic things. Like if there was some park or something that wasn't like meant to be a family park so much, and it could be like central-ish to town, but like sort of like centrally creative where it's like around a corner where like tourists aren't, if ever gonna see it. You just kind of really have to like accidentally drive by it, like get off the main drags to see it. And otherwise, it's not an eyesore for people who that's their regular commute or anything. It's not like a big drugged in open drug scene or anything like that at all. It would have to be, I would say minimally regulated. Just regulated, like, as in to the extent of like what you would expect regular law enforcement to do, but without putting that burden on regular law enforcement, which I also don't have a clear plan like this guy, but the difference being I'm not running for office right now.
And people are not getting the help they need. So one vision is that you would start where you have the strongest local support. Another vision is that you start in a smaller town. Another vision is that you start where it's hardest, which is LA.
I would say start in LA.
They Right on, guys. That's the way you do it. When you want to rough out something in an agile manner like that, start with the hardest problem. Then you know what the red line that you're dealing with is. And then it's all downhill from there theoretically, right?
Just because it's too far gone and it needs to be cleaned up as quickly as possible. And some headway needs to be done because it's just going to keep growing. Have you paid attention to what happened in Austin?
Yes.
Austin's been pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because the mayor who I had on the podcast, he really clearly stated that this is his goal. He said, I want to clean this up before I leave office. And
There it is. Okay, I even noted this on my notes. This is where stuff gets crazy because when we start fooling ourselves and telling ourselves these politicians care, right? On a local level, that could be true. In a place, in small towns on local levels, sometimes I want to tell myself that could be true. So I'm going to let that narrative fly, even though there's a lot of evidence that most of the time that's not even like that on the local level, right? But let's say that somebody slips through the cracks occasionally, and that's true. On a grand scale, big cities, states, all that, I think completely 99.999% not true. Um, and the people who get into that power, they either get in a little bit of cahoots, so to speak, or they're quickly removed from power and public smear campaigns, all that kind of shit. Excuse me, stuff. So they don't last too long. The thing is us telling ourselves that these politicians truly care and that the smiles mean something and all that. That is them tugging at our emotional strings. That's their profession. Just like the professional wrestlers, their profession is to be like, ooh, to really sell you on that move or whatever. Um, that's kind of what they're going for. So if you don't snap out of it, if we don't snap out of it, right, then we're caught. We're caught in that. And it's nice to be caught in that. Sometimes it feels like, why does there have to be so much friction in life? Why can't we just pick, like somebody offers us a simple choice, a couple politicians, whatever, and we just select the one that, like, shouldn't this capitalist majority rule, whatever thing kind of like weed itself out? But it doesn't work like that. We have to question, we have to critical think, right? If we don't, there's always that wolf in sheep's clothing, lots of wolves in sheep's clothing, waiting to chomp at that bit. One quick statistic I want to point out is the that whole 1% thing, right? That the world's ruled by the elite 1% and all that kind of a thing. There's lies, damn lies in statistics, right? Statistics can be manipulated and anchored in whatever form and fashion. So with that, it's like, wow, really? 1%? But if you think about it, what's 1% of 8 billion people? What's 1% of 7 billion people even? I mean, it's just like, is that 80 million people? I'm probably off by a zero or something, but it's a lot. It's a lot of people. Um, what if I write that out on my thing right here? So eight, I'm doing the zeros real quick so I can figure out for sure what 1% is. So we'd have to have, I don't know. I can't even think of math mode. Usually that's like an easy thing for me to solve. But yeah, it's a lot. It's something that a number we wouldn't want to hang around and count the heads, play duck duck goose or nothing, you know. So, oh man, I forgot where I was going with that. I was gonna flip and invert the 1% the other way and say I was going off on too much of a tangent. If I remember, I'll bring it back up.
And if I don't do that, I'll consider my tenure a failure.
Good.
And he did a lot.
He's reversed himself because there was a ballot initiative passed that banned camping.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one that allowed public camping, right?
Yes.
And then there was a ballot initiative that passed.
Okay, he was the one that allowed public camping, right? This isn't directly off the last thing, but this is back to the more mainstream point. He allowed public camping, and then he like changed it. Oh, we need to do this. That is the Hegelian dialectic. What it is it's thesis, which is some idea, right? Antithesis, which is an opposition to that idea, and then synthesis, which is this proposed solution. So you get maybe, I mean, you could apply it in your own ways. Here's one that I'm pulling out there. Thesis. We don't, the police are, there's too much police brutality, especially against minorities or something, right? Antithesis. And you could keep going, scaling, move this thesis window back and forward up the chain, right? And like make that your origin point for this whole little template. Antithesis to that would be like defund the police. I might be off. I feel like I'm off. I should have probably thought of these more before. But yeah, you end up with the what would be a good example? Thesis. Like let's just move the window over and say the thesis is defund the police. The antithesis would then be, defund the police, they're brutal. Then the antithesis would be, we need the police. Look at all the crime that's starting to happen as we defund them. And then synthesis would be like some proposed political solution to that because there's this butting of heads there, right? There's this divide. Like all of a sudden friends and family aren't so friends and family-ish anymore to each other once they get to this topic, right? Something I need to articulate better.
That banned it. Now, my understanding is that a lot of unsheltered homeless have moved into the woods, have moved into other parts of Austin. I haven't tracked it.
And these are some of the things too, is the people who move into the woods that aren't drug users, that aren't thieves, those people need some sympathy, honestly. Those are the people, there's people in the city as well. They're living like cockroaches because they're embarrassed about their newfound situation and stuff. I've been teabagged in these situations to where it's like, end up in that situation. I'm the guy who was just like, whoa, I just had two cars and a house and all these things, 5 minutes ago, and now it's all gone. And I'm standing by the door at the supermarket, like not directly by it. I'm not one of those people who ever like slept in the entrance of a freaking grocery store. Whatever. You know what I mean? Just standing off to the side, like, okay, I just got off a bus and now I just got out of this store because I bought some chips or something. And now I'm standing off to the side, like eating the chips. People probably think I'm like a loser, which obviously I have lost. And at that point, yeah, I'm currently a loser, but it's not like I made I mean, I do take direct responsibility for my decisions, but it wasn't, it was like I think I was making constructive decisions at that point. I split up with my wife, and the place that we had moved into, we went from that $400 place that I was telling you about to a house. And so that we knew it would cost both of our incomes. I mean, we were probably able to put away a tiny bit or something, but we knew, for the most part, speaking and not, we got to discount, get rid of that headroom because who knows, we might need that like at any point. So we knew we were going to be effectively paycheck to paycheck at that point. So when we split, there was no way that either one of us could afford that place on their own. So that's what led to my position. So what I did was I called up an old buddy, and he happened to be in a transitional point in his life, so to speak. It seemed like from the conversation, I would now describe that as just dire straits. Well, I said, hey, I got an idea. Why don't you come over here? This is a 2-bedroom house. My wife and our son are, taking off. I'm going to let her take off with him in the car and everything because I was self-employed at the time and I felt like that, and I didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to maintain the house. And she had a regular 9 to 5 job, so to speak, and everything, and was pretty steady. So I let her take our child and vehicle, and I decided to take the risk myself, and there's also a certain, you could discount it as laziness too, whatever, somewhere in between there. And so I called him up, said, hey, why don't you come in and do that? Well, actually, it was before she'd even left. She was going to leave. We had set 30 days. We were doing like the friendly thing and all that. And so that it could be like a smooth transition. Well, he came over to be, fit in that transition. And he just went ahead and like literally ate us out of the house. And then just so that drove her out. She was like, I'm not going to fulfill the 30-day obligation, whatever. I'm out of here. And I was like, you know what? I can't blame you. I'm so sorry. And so, my family was gone, and it was just me and good old buddy old pal who obviously was very quickly doing the exact opposite. He actually said that he was going to supply us with groceries. That was going to be his thing. You actually can't even evict somebody if they say they'll come over and they'll help with groceries and they literally put like a carton of milk in your fridge or something. They have therefore provided to the household, and that counts as a contribution as far as eviction procedures go, the same as rent, at least in this state. So but he didn't even do that. That's the irony. He did not even contribute to the household. And then he started saying something like basically that I owed him reparations. I don't know. Anyway, all I know is that crack is an interesting drug. He ended up busting out a window to get in one night. I was letting him borrow my bike, which was my transportation at that point, and he wasn't getting jobs on it. I don't know. I guess I'm ranting at this point. I'm sorry, I forgot what was going on. That's how I ended up homeless after that. And it wasn't my very first time being homeless, but that was the beginning of a chronic homeless stint for me. And I'm not blaming it on him. I was just sort of describing painting the picture. I take direct responsibility for my actions and the results of them. That was something I've with any real knowledge or experience or thought, and looking at somebody's track record, I should have kind of expected that.
Closely. But I mean, at the end
They've
of the day,
done a lot to put people into shelters.
That's great.
But the thing is, if you don't kidnap them, it's very difficult. I mean, I'm not saying you should kidnap people.
This is where stuff gets creepy.
If you don't physically force them into doing something, these people, I mean, by nature.
Kidnap, physically force? Are you serious, dude? If you don't kidnap them, physically force? All right, did I not just tell you my story? You know what I mean? And these people want to kidnap, physically force me off the street from living like a cockroach, trying to like not even exist. And then you're going to put this kind of pressure on somebody? Do you even fucking know? Do you even fucking know? And these guys claim to be liberals. That other guy, he's now independent, but he was a Democrat. Joe Rogan claims to be a fucking lefty. You know what the only thing, with all due respect, the only thing that makes this guy a lefty is that he says he's liberal. If you gave a checkbox of all the characteristics and traits and had him check those boxes, other than the fact that he claims to be liberal, every single one of those other boxes would be conservative. I mean, you know what I mean? Every box would be conservative. Literally. Does Joe Rogan like, is he a nationalist? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. He can have all these opinions. I'm not, that's fine. But the fact is these people don't even know who they are. Does he like guns? Yeah. Does he like to hunt? Yeah. Are these not conservative traits? Does he love his nation? You know, like, does he joke about transgenderism and all that and act like, whatever? Yeah, he does. And that's okay to have those opinions. That's okay to be uncomfortable with that stuff, whatever. That's okay to say stupid, mean things. And as long as you're willing to have people say stupid, mean things back to you, you know? But I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think it's better to be constructive and whatnot. But whenever it comes down to any of these lefty ideologies, he's never about it. Unless it's like this. Unless he thinks it's like, oh, here's my original idea or whatever. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. He's being pretty level-headed in here. But you know, on some of those episodes where he goes off and acts like he's got just these definitive ideas. And these people, they're allowed to do that, right? These are opinion pieces. These aren't fact pieces. So it's just weird when it comes under this guy's like, we're going to sit down and have a roundtable fact discussion or something. And it's really like a lot of people say, you know, it's the 14-year-old kid glorified fucking talking about aliens in a basement half the time. So you got to kind of weed that out. You know, you got to take it as entertainment value. And there's a lot of truth in entertainment, right? There's a lot of truth in that Hollywood film. But at the end of the day, if you don't know it's a fucking Hollywood film, then we're hypnotizing ourselves too much. When I was a kid, I couldn't even watch movies because it was too fake. So I had to start selling myself on it. See if you can remember that point in your own mind.
That like the type of person that's willing to live on a tent on Cesar Chavez, like that's a radical mindset. Sorry.
It is, and for the most part, what you're saying is true. But as crazy as it sounds, not everybody fits your demographic. It's not black and white.
To use the word radical again, but that's
the word's radicals on your mind because you're just talking about kidnapping and forcing people.
A lawn chair on a major.
What happened when people did that in Portland? What happened when they were swooping people up with vans in Portland? I mean, it cleaned up, and it's like, yeah, that is a radical sweeping solution, right? To do that, but they're doing this, and you'll hear this term mental health brought up a lot. Which is scary. As soon as I started hearing mental health get thrown around so much a few years ago now, I realized this, where they want to defund the police and, you know, send a psychiatrist and stuff. Think it out. Hit the fast forward button on all this stuff. Hit the paranoia key, whatever, like, because it can happen. And if we don't do that, there's no pushback in those directions. What happens when you start sending people out in the name of mental health? Well, all of a sudden you've seen how they're trying to push their needles on people, you know? Next thing you know, people are going in for psychiatric evaluations and coming out medded up. And for a lot of people, that might be the answer for them, you know? But this needs to be a choice, if that's, you know, and not a choice that's like a quote-unquote forced funneled choice, right? But, I mean, if there's going to be the kid at the supermarket bagging my groceries while he's drooling in a trance, maybe that's better than him sitting with his chin against his chest on the sidewalk, you know, on Cesar Chavez Drive or whatever, you know, like that kind of a thing. Like, okay, maybe that's better. And if that's his choice and that's what he wants, or she or whoever, you know, like, then okay. But should everybody be for? What if all of a sudden, you know, what if the cashier's drooling too and stuff like? I don't want to see stuff go to that type of an extreme. And a lot of people think like, oh, it will never get that extreme. Look at the past 2 years of stuff. Look at what they tried to run. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, we just closed the door, didn't lock the deadbolt, and then that fucking bull just slammed against that door. And we don't know if the next slam's busting that door open or not. But now we're locking the deadbolt, I hope, at least.
Major street,
right,
in front of this tent that you live in, and you're drinking water out of an old milk jug that you bought or got somewhere. It's crazy.
It's not okay.
The whole thing is crazy, and they've done a great job in Austin of cleaning it up. But one of the things that
do we need radical news? Can you not tell that person like, hey, you are loitering? Can we not have safe and sane kind of laws that just like don't have to turn into weird blue laws like, oh, it's completely illegal to camp in the city. Like unquestionably zero tolerance. And then those laws get put on the books in cities like mine, and then they don't get removed. They turn into blue laws where what happens is the law's just there and it's not enforced. Then at the drop of the hat, they can just enforce it. They don't have to enact new legislation.
That the mayor said when I talked to him about it, he said, we can clean up 3,000 people. We can do that. He goes, but if it gets to where Los Angeles is, that's untenable. It's unmanageable. That's what his thought was.
Yeah.
He felt like it was so far gone that no one had the resources to gather up all those people and get them off the streets. And like
that's not true.
Well, okay, like Skid Row.
Right. These are known problems. I mean, even if you just go back 100 years, these are known problems. You can go back thousands of years.
Yeah.
That would be where you would start. You want to start at Skid Row.
I don't know that we'll start there.
That's what I'm saying. See what I'm saying? Like, that's such a giant
we'll get
problem.
there.
I don't know that we'll start there. Okay, at least Joe's staying on the same narrative. This guy's now you'll see just right about just passing the halfway point, he's going to start backtracking on all these things he set up. So do you think he's not going to do that if he gets office? And I'm not trying to single him out. He's just pitting himself up as fodder, but this is the case for all these politicians. And there's people with even way more dramatic plans than him and way more solid plans too.
Well, yeah, I mean, the other issue is that, and let me just address this other issue which you raised, which I think is an important issue, which is like, if let's say we do a really good job and we get addicts and mentally ill people more of them coming to California, and then we're shouldering the burden for the entire country, there's two answers to that. First is that we're going to need to ask the states that sent us their people to share that burden, or we're going to need to go to Congress and be like, look, if we're going to treat the nation's addicts in rehab facilities, then we're going to need to be reimbursed. We have a mechanism.
Okay, so he's saying they're going to need this money, right? And they're going to go to the states where these people came from. So I guess if they have like a Colorado ID, and then they're going to go to Colorado and say you're somehow responsible. So for the two back to extremes, which aren't necessarily true, but let's hit the two edges of the slippery slope on there and say, okay, you do that, not going to happen, right? Fuck you. What makes you think you can come to us for money, right? Okay, there's one extreme I see, and then the other extreme is, oh, okay, now we need to start regulating who the fuck can leave the state. Because, we might be responsible if you go to some other state and piss on the sidewalk, So we're going to have to set up checkpoints, and people start getting weird about the checkpoints. So, just like the blue laws, they can just be like kind of like California's border or whatever, where you're going across it and, there's a booth and they just either stop, wave you, or just roll down the window, say hi and let you through, right? No big deal. Why? That's the kind of thing like if you're not guilty, then why do you have a problem? What do you have to hide, right? And that's, on that hand, that's cool. But then we know when we have to ask ourselves that question, we're at that line of whatever, right? It's sort of like the stalemate standoff in Korea between the North and South, where there's that border, right? It becomes that type of a scenario where it's like, okay, at least we're at this peaceful standoff. There's like this guard there. It's a tough situation, and especially in a state like California, because California in a lot of ways is almost like its own country, right? It really is in a lot of, I mean, at the very least, its own economy. But yeah, I don't want to say that the answer is to like eradicate any, the checkpoint at the border. That's an extremity. But to open a discussion about it that doesn't hit the extremes, that talks about the middle, that's something that politics doesn't allow, or if it does, for very little time.
There's also a real danger if this becomes a place where people can go to clean up and people can go to be taken care of, that more people come, and then crime increases, and then more.
That doesn't quite. I would like to see any evidence of that, because if somebody, I don't see people going. I mean, if people do go to clean up, it's usually a fast turnover. Then you can do that 90-day thing. Like, I've known people from areas that are really bad with meth and stuff back in the day, and they would come up to Oregon. That's ultimately kind of those were the stories that led me up here, was talking to people doing meth in the meth town that I grew up in. They would go to Oregon, grow their hair out, hang out for a few months, get clean, maybe smoke a bunch of weed or something, and then come back and be all kind of like hippie preacher rubbing off on us for a minute when they came back and everything. And then slowly but surely, very slowly, end up back in their same old ways and everything. But on that level, that seemed cool, like the people who were making it all the way to Oregon that I knew were not, maybe they might have done a little thievery or stuff like that down in the state, not in the States, but in California. But once they got up to Oregon, they were not about that lifestyle. They were all about letting that go. So they did that. And that's what most of the people I know did. The people I knew that were thieves weren't, North California was as far as they were making it. They weren't trying to like waste gas or, I don't know, get into a state where they didn't know the laws or something. So that can work on that level, on that type of turnout. That type of system from my own sampling does not directly correlate with this luring people in a bad way. That lures people in to take advantage of the positive system, spin around and get out and come back and put a positive influence on other people. What sucks is what I see, what I hear about. I haven't been there, but in like Hawaii, where they're really catering to you, whether or not you're using drugs or in rehab or not. Like they're just very liberal in those regards, which I don't think we should let people sit there. And I don't care if they got a needle hanging out of their arm. I don't think they should have to suffer. Like I don't think we should be doing these extremist measures to them or whatever. But they obviously need a if they do want to continue with life in any sort of valuable way, like a dramatic change, probably. Anyway, it's a tough topic. Let's continue.
More people leave the state,
Right.
which, I mean, the numbers of people that have left California over the last couple of years are staggering.
That's right. We need.
And Joe's one of them. Please don't take your politics elsewhere. You know what I mean? And even since I've retouched him with my conservative values moving to Oregon, I don't want to flip this state red. I wouldn't want that. You know what I mean? I look at it like, go somewhere. If you don't like it, then go somewhere else. The nice thing is to have that variety, right? I don't know. I feel like that because if we end up in a solid blue or solid red state kind of a thing, you don't have anywhere to run. So I like that variety. If LA wants to be a shithole, if that's what everybody there voted and decided, that's fine. It is what it is. But if they don't, they don't. Whatever. Keep the diversity. That's what America's about. That was one of the positive things. I'm not sold on the whole fact that it's horrible. Slavery was wrong. There's definitely some things that are wrong that should never happen again, ever. But there were a lot of things that were right too, and those things should continue to happen, and they should not just be abolished. A lot of people don't even have clear plans. And the creepy thing is there are people out there sitting behind the scenes with clear plans and lots of money and power that are like, oh yeah, just French Revolution your asses on yourself and we'll come right in, right?
All the other issue, yes, that's definitely a concern. So you also need more police officers. So I point out you don't have to choose between mass homelessness and mass incarceration, but that means that you need the 3 key Ps: more police, more psychiatry, and more probation.
What the fuck? Of course you do, right? Of course you do. More police to round them up. More psychiatry in their veins. And more supervision when we put them back out on the street. That's input, processing, and output right there in a crazy manner. I mean, who could not think of this solution? This is pretty Orwellian sounding, in my opinion. I run with it because, on a light level, that's cool, right? If you have more patrol or something, I don't know, what's the net effect that they want to get from more police? They just say more police. Like, what can we throw at the wall? Well, we could throw the 3 Ps: police, psychiatry, and probation. Well, we've definitely thrown those outer Ps at the wall pretty hard. A lot, right? And a lot of people have it does a lot of good. The system's fucked, but it does a lot of good. I've gone through a rotation in the system. I went for the tour to get, I wanted to have I ordered a 5-night stay in a jail cell I actually only ordered a one night, not even a night. I just ordered like I wanted to see the room. And they said, "Why don't you go ahead and stay for a night?" And then I did, and it was a weekend, and they're like, "You know what? It's the weekend, and everybody's off, and then holidays and all this kind of stuff." So they're like, "Why don't you just stay?" So I did. I stayed for 5 days, and I have to say, it met and exceeded all expectations. The punch that I could pour on the floor and it would stain the floor red was interesting. Um, it was interesting how they gave you an orange, several packets of sugar, and sliced bread with, I think, every meal. It was like, here's your meal and the ingredients to make pruno in case the cells got you down. And the guy across from me was had been on lockdown for like a month. The solitary confinement, I guess, was full, and so they just locked him up on the what do they call it, the 23-hour lockdown block, where they give you the 23-hour lockdown and then an hour to walk up and down the aisle. And yeah, that was trippy. I mean, to see somebody, I caught the tail end. I got there, you see the excitement on somebody when they're excited to see a new person and whatnot. But I happened to catch the end of that transition where he was like coming up on that month of being like isolated besides the little window across from his cell and everything. And it was just, you see it break down a human psychologically as it's happening to yourself and whatnot. And it's a trippy situation. And another thing I witnessed in there was that, they give you a little squiggly pen and paper and everything, which was really cool. Just like any good hotel would, they give you the, some stationery to write on and stuff. And so I thought, why not just draw out a little deck of cards, and cut up the pages, fold them up, and lick it and tear them up into a little set of cards and everything. Well, when you're in there, what they did is they give you this little like brochure, and I thought like, who reads the brochure, right? I'm not going to read the brochure. Then you end up so damn bored, you're like, I've memorized the brochure, right? This like 20-page pamphlet or whatever about your stay, and it started seeming like sketch of like making these cards and everything. So I just drawn them out on the paper, and I wait till this cool, what do you call him, a CO, right? Came by, and I said, hey, I was drew these cards on here. I was about to cut them out. I just wanted to run it by you and everything. And he was like, if I was you, I wouldn't do that. So I didn't, right? And I'm like first time offender kind of person. I've been cuffed once and thrown in the back of a police car, like really just a few little things like that, only once with that. I'd never been like booked or anything, so I don't know if they're like trying to make an example out of me or what. And to myself, well, then these other guys come in that it's like everybody knows their name when they're walking down the aisle, with a deck of cards in his hand, like the next dude the next day or whatever that came in. And I was just like, wow, really? Like this dude could come in with a deck of cards and I can't even draw one on paper. Like, and then next thing you know, he's sliding them under the door across the way for half a book or whatever. I don't know. But you don't want to hate on people. But so anyway, that just seems like kind of a revolving door thing where it's like they've kind of given up on the people as far as rehabilitation, but even the guards know them, you know what I mean? And I've worked in this business. I've been in this business, I started out as a part of the system, and then I kind of like, in all honesty, I've been doing anger management counseling lately, as a facilitator. But, anybody who's honest, even as a facilitator, they would say they're a client as well. Or they should be, I would think. Most people should be. But I've been on both sides of the system. I've seen it, I don't, not any more than I want to be, but, well, yeah, maybe more than I want to be, but I don't repeat that. Anyway.
So that is for sure part of this agenda. I think the other part of it that's not appreciated
Agenda.
is that you need more
Yeah.
development. When you visit Skid Row, so I'm not a I've been in Northern California.
He even said
since
agenda.
1993.
I mean, it is,
When I
in
went to
honesty,
Skid
but
Row,
it's
I was
creepy.
like, this neighborhood is awesome. I mean, if you ignore the complete human depravity and tragedy.
I mean, do I need to say anything? This neighborhood is awesome. Can you imagine him getting out? He's got this big grin. He gets out of the car. Like, there's somebody like laying there dead. Like, whatever. This neighborhood is awesome. Like, wow, I could put a Circle K right there. Fancy restaurant over here. That's awesome. Besides all the dead people and homeless people, isn't there somewhere we could put them? This is awesome. Cheap rent. We could buy all this stuff really cheap and fix it up. Sorry, dude. Fucking cuck. Sorry. Sorry, I take that all back. No, I don't. I don't know. I don't know. Fuck it. Um, yeah, this is the same pattern that all these guys do. You know what I mean? And it's like he said, and like I said, the Hegelian dialectic. You go in and create this problem, right? I mean, is this guy not a liberal? Is he not a Democrat? Were Democrats not pro defund the police and all this crap 2 years ago? You know what I mean? Did they not create this mess? And now what does he want to do? He wants to come in and give you the solution. And so do the right wingers too, the Republicans. They all do. They all want to come in and give you this cleanup fucking solution. They create a problem to give you a solution to it. And that's how they keep their fucking wheels turning and their feet moving forward, whether it's the right foot or the left foot. I mean, if you ignore the complete human depravity and tragedy. Oh, well, thanks for qualifying that because we didn't, and you looked like a fucking sociopath when you stepped out and said that.
Oh, you mean
on
like
the
the
grounds.
real estate?
Yeah, you look around the buildings
yeah.
and like it's sunny and it's near the highways and you're like, this is an incredible neighborhood.
It's sunny near the highways. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah, really. Paint a nice picture. It's called gentrification. It's gentrification. You go in and trash a place, get the property, wrangle the property value out of the hands of the people, and then you go in and buy the stuff dirt cheap with your cronies and build back better, right?
It needs to be redeveloped. You need to have a much broader mix of people in there.
They tried to do that for a while, right? I mean,
It's to some extent it's happening, but it needs to happen much more significantly, which means that we need to expedite and cut the red tape and get those buildings redeveloped.
And cut the red tape, huh? I mean, there's truth to this, right? Yeah, we do. It's probably something that seems like they're holding back. Bipartisan effort to hold back. Of course, not up front, right? But I mean, kind of. And no, wait. Don't do little piddly stuff because then it will seem like nothing's working, right? Just hold back to where we need expedited change. We need no red tape. It's like pulling the rubber band back. Like you got to get the freaking BB, the marble, the rock, whatever you're shooting with the slingshot. You've got to get it through the partition in front of you, the window, whatever. So you just keep on pulling it back, and the more you pull it back, when you let go, yeah, that agenda is going to go right through that barrier
and get people in there. And then it means that a lot of those services, you don't have like there's no constitutional right to just go to be in Skid Row or in downtown LA or downtown San Francisco and just be given a free apartment.
And there's no constitutional right for your ass to come in and fucking dictate, whatever either. Obviously, you're supposed to have some sway in that opinion, but whatever.
If you want rehab, or if you're arrested and given the choice of rehab or prison, the rehab you might get might be in Fresno or Bakersfield, or it might be in Yuba County.
Fresno or Bakersfield? Okay. I've got to pause for about 20 minutes to allow my family and friends that are in Bakersfield to stop laughing hysterically. You're going to send somebody to rehab in Fresno or Bakersfield? Why don't you just fucking hook them up with the drugs right then and there? I can't think of a worse place on the fucking planet to send somebody for rehab than Fresno or Bakersfield. Are you kidding me? The meth town I just told you I grew up in, that's Bakersfield. Okay? That's the place people leave to get clean, not go to. I've never heard of somebody going to Bakersfield to get clean from somewhere else. I'd like to think it happens in a, isolated bubble a few times, but on a whole, across the board, Bakersfield and Fresno are the two worst places in California, besides downtown and the bad areas of those big cities. Those are the two worst places in California that you could go to get fucking clean. Brilliant. Of course, he says, let's send them there. Let's send them to more of their ilk.
Or it might be in the Sierras, and that might be where you
or in the Sierras. We have these two extremes, right? We're going to send them to the hell they should have come from, or we're going to send them to paradise where they can run around on a big field and be constructive and chew a hay straw.
That might be the best place to be.
Yeah.
90-day rehab facility or
90-day or 120. No. Yeah, those will get people clean. They'll get a lot of people clean or whatever, but that's just revolving door. You need years, plural, and ongoing with people. We all know it. Anybody with a serious problem.
120 days where you're then on a fire crew. I mean, for heaven's sake, we need many more people working on preparing forests and to prevent fires, for example, is one of the many things that we need to do in California.
Cleanups, cleaning up
absolutely.
Yeah.
Prescribed burns. That's like manual hard labor.
Manual hard labor. This is a punishment now. He said that's like manual hard labor. You know what I mean? I've done labor. I've done hard labor. Years. You could say my trade was a general laborer. I've literally worked as a carpenter, as a framer. I've literally worked as an electrician, as a specialized tradesman, not as like a day laborer that's like, oh, I happen to be helping out an electrical crew. I'm going to say that I've worked as an electrician. I have literally worked years, plural, as an electrician with, the electrical meter testers, all electrical tape, all that on my tool bags every day. Like, I've done all those trades, but more than any of them, I've done general labor, I think. I think by trade, that's otherwise it's right up there. Never once in my life has a job described itself that I remember as hard labor. Man, like manual, we need prescribed burns. That's like manual hard labor. What this sounds like, the place that he's coming from, that he's Freudian slipping on, is a place of punishment. Like when they do when they pull them out of jail and they say, hey, go clean up the side of the freeway or whatever with the orange jacket, with the orange jumpsuit on, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, that's understandable that, like, at least you're not in jail, right? That for people in jail, that's a better thing. I remember when I was on my 5-day staycation in jail, I would have loved to do community service. I would have said, hey, you know what? Pip me out there for freaking 20 hours. I'm down. I need 4 hours of sleep. I'm good. I would have been all about community service. So in that situation where I'm being punished already and community service is actually more humane, okay, yeah, that sounds way more feasible. But when you take these people that are now, he's trying to turn into open drug scene users, he's now trying to criminalize being homeless. Literally. You know what I mean? And this is a sweeping zero tolerance style measure that means that the 5 or more % of people that, maybe it's 50% of people, who knows, that aren't having a current drug problem or something are going to be funneled into this one size fits all universal treatment that obviously is targeted at people with these kinds of problems. You know what I mean? This is gross. And it's like the people in jails and prisons have virtually no voice, no rights. And the next tier after that is people that are homeless and in these kinds of situations. So the worst thing you can do is label them bad like this. Those people have a siren above them that need to be labeled like that. Yeah, I think. You know what I mean? For the most part. Anyway, manual hard labor. Let's automatically make these people fucking criminal and profit off of it. That doesn't sound like a good option. So anyway, if you listen to this in context, obviously I'm pausing it and jumping on it. I'd implore you to watch it a few times completely on your own without me and see how you feel about it. And definitely comment and tell me if I'm an idiot, or just share your opinion civilly if you'd like, whatever, please.
Not everybody's going to do it. Some people might learn Python at rehab. Some people might learn
So some people might learn Python. It sounds like a cool idea, but effectively the opposite argument is he's effectively saying learn to code, right? And Twitter bans people for saying learn to code. So he's offering, not that Twitter's right, but I'm just saying, look where these narratives are, Where was he 2 years ago? Can you not look this guy up and see? I mean, I'm not saying him for sure. I'm just using him as abstractly as he seems to be throwing people around, arguably. That was he not one of the people in that crowd saying, learn to code so bad? Which, by the way, was a comment that Joe Biden himself, none other, made.
Woodworking.
Python?
That's just a basic programming language.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And woodworking. So on a real note too, with the Python and maybe even woodworking, for one thing, like I said, I did carpentry. Carpentry is not even a trade anymore. It used to be carpentry was like a dude could build your whole house and come in and build your cabinets and desk and everything by scratch if you really wanted him to, right? I mean, obviously there's specialized forms. That's a little bit exaggerated, but carpentry was a broad subject from everything from a cabinet to a building, you know. And nowadays it's so much the opposite end of that spectrum where it's not like that. Like when I say I did carpentry, I quickly qualified it with framing. Even though I did a little bit of finished carpentry, a tiny bit of like some other stuff, I didn't do those by trade. I only did framing by trade, which means all I did was rough in framing. So you teach these people woodworking, it depends, you know, if it's a full scale like worm drive, skill saws, you know, air guns, stuff like that. If it's like real industrious kind of tools you're going to see on a job site, like, yeah, then you're giving them real employable skills. But if you're just teaching them how to use like a bandsaw to cut out a really cool little plaque for the wall or something, then obviously that's not going to be, you know, for most people, that's not going to be super practical. But yeah, the speaking of the whole learn to code thing, I kind of just gave my emotional response. But on a realistic response, I'm fairly familiar with that industry. And right now, the field is, ever since years ago when that comment became a derogatory remark, even the field's been flooded with programmers. And most, I mean, that like this might help a few people. You know, I am a programmer. I'm not gonna lie. You know what I mean? I programmed on the streets. Like that's for somebody like me that would help. But the thing is, I taught myself programming. You know what I mean? I didn't. It wasn't like somebody came and picked me up by the boots. Well, they picked me up by the suspenders. I don't know, the underwear. They gave me a wedgie. It wasn't like somebody came and picked me up and taught me this stuff. This was something I taught myself for the most, so to speak, over the years. It takes so much self-discipline and drive to learn to code, and to especially for most people to make money off of it. But maybe it's just it's not. It sounds better on paper than it is because it's like, oh, there's so much software jobs out there. You're gonna take the homeless people and make them. You know, this is so fantastic sounding, and it really fucking is. And honestly, before anybody was spouting learn to code, when I was homeless at the library, I seriously considered starting a business right there at the library with just the people who I saw next to me, and just like I contemplated that. Like, what if I just took this homeless dude right here and like, what's he good at? You know, what's he over there doing? Like, what if we just started doing this stuff when I was trying to self-start myself as like a remote online developer? All my tech experience is remote online for the most part. Um, I mean, yeah, if I were to say anything that's not is just like so little and few and far between, and most of that unpaid even. So, uh, yeah, my programming experience is all online, whatever. I've been doing this for years. You know, I was doing so much online development back in the open source days. Like, I don't know, had my fingers in that a little bit. And then nowadays with the remote, what they call Zoom meetings and all that shit, Zoom wasn't even around when I was doing that stuff. You know what I mean? That was back when like Skype was popular and up through when Slack came out and stuff like that. I was already in the game, so I was already familiar with all this stuff. So once 2020 hit, side note, I dipped out. I actually had just picked up a contract right then. I started to work on that. That kind of fizzled. So I was just like, you know what? Forget this. There is no way I'm gonna get on this pandemic crap and watch everybody else catch up to like where I'm at. Like watch this whole goofy world with their whole Zoom thing that like I didn't know anybody who used Zoom before 2020. I honestly didn't. I mean, I have to imagine I probably used it once or twice without realizing it because there were like some online remote meeting programs that you'd randomly try just because whatever you have a client and that's what they're using. But at a certain point, I said no, no more experimenting with those clients, no more Skype even. I walked away from Skype and started refusing clients if they wouldn't try something besides Skype. And that was about the time Slack came out. And Slack didn't replace it at first, for sure, because Slack didn't even offer the, you know, the voice video chats and all that kind of stuff, which Google Hangouts even did. But anyway, so it was just creepy New World Order stuff once Zoom like got the traction that it did. And don't forget, you know, just finishing up, closing up that side note, with that whole 2020 thing, with that pandemic, like not saying whatever about the virus thing, but it was a plan. It was planned. Like it's not a conspiracy. Like whether you think the virus just popped out of nature or whatever, it was the whole reaction to it was planned, right? Like we know that. That's a fact. Go, you can dig into my channel. I've got Event 201 stuff in there, and Event 201 happened like, you know, a dozen or more times before even that event. So it's like all these reactions are known. They were doing them in China and kind of in Italy, right? Two countries we didn't exactly get along with in World War II, supposedly, but uh, we followed their example then. And they were like, oh, we need to follow their example, right? Publicly, they were saying that. And behind the scenes, what did social media do the second the media narrative changed here and the government narrative changed here and all that? Uh, Social media like flip their table stands like some of those sellers do in those marketplaces at other countries where they like flip their tables like when the cruise ships come in, right? And if you're local, bananas are $1 or whatever, but then the cruise ships come in and then now bananas are like $4 or whatever, right? For this hour. And so that's what they do, so when they go to flip their tables on you, it's like, hey, motherfucker, well, you got your table flipped on me. I want to see your local table. You're like all of a sudden LinkedIn's now providing me with a little news pulse up in the corner that coincided. It dropped at the same time COVID restrictions did, the same time the lockdowns did. Boop. Oh, you think that LinkedIn, that big old bloated piece of turd, you think they cranked any feature shipment life cycle out in like a day or two? No. No. I know how those places work. I study their engineering. I've read LinkedIn's engineering blogs, all that kind of stuff. That LinkedIn's a good example of one of the, at least back then, to my knowledge, they were one of the biggest, slowest moving machines there was. There was no way they were doing anything overnight. So we know that they had probably prototyped that against China, and they had it well honed and polished by the time they dropped it on us. And that was not coincidentally when I got banned from LinkedIn too, was once I started questioning that narrative. I'd already been kind of like trying to be kind of a little bit comedic troll in the software engineering circles on there. And, I admit my comedy, I think it was over the line what I had posted a couple of posts on, but it was meant to be provocative in the sense to provoke thought of like what I'm doing here with this, of just to say, hey, consider some exaggerated, like, what if this gets out of hand? What if these types of plans and it'll only take a little bit of time and we'll keep it humane and it turns into drug out over years, and a lot of questions about the humane thing and a lot of force and all that kind of stuff. It's scary stuff. And I mean my ultimate goal is just to question all of this kind of stuff. It's not to like, I wasn't trying to like offend anybody, you know. I realize there's definitely some people on the bad end of the stick that could get offended by that, but I retracted when somebody called me out on something. They said, "Hey, dude, I've seen a lot of your stuff or whatever kind of thing, and this is too far." I said, "Hey, you know what? You're right," and I edited my post to make it. I had just exaggerated it too far. I tried to slip funny in there because I felt like the narrative was trying to go too serious, and I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I was being like drugged there in the proper sense, right? Like if I'm going to tell you some sad story, I'm like, "Oh," and then I start tell you a sad story, and I start crying like that or something, and it's like, okay, like this still feels like more like a Saturday Night Live skit, like I gotta laugh at it. So that's where I was coming from. But in hindsight, once I posted it and the way that it went out to, whoever in my network, the way that they received it wasn't the way that I felt. So I retracted a little bit on that. I took off that unnecessary, disgusting comment I had made. And anyway, that's all to say, I had had my account flagged for like bad profile picture or a couple things like that. I'd never had my account flagged in the past for like, you put up this content. If you continue to post this kind of content, there will be no more tolerance. You will be permanently banned from our. There was nothing to ever say to me that I was posting questionable content that I recall. In any of those emails they sent me or whatever. So I would just go back in the email and say, hey, just fix your profile picture. So it's like, okay, they don't like, they're going to pick on me. Somebody probably flagged my thing for putting questionable content. They probably reported it. And then when LinkedIn's person came and skimmed my thing, they saw that like, okay, that's not according to our exact policy on how a profile picture should be. So this person should, that's what I'll dock them for. That's what the way, how else could I assume it played out? I'm open to suggestions. So that happened a few times. Well, then I get permanently banned and out of nowhere, basically. I literally posted a couple of those things. I get permanently banned, and then I tried to appeal it. Well, when I clicked appeal, it literally just is like, okay, you're filing an appeal. It doesn't like let you type a sentence and say something to your defense. That's it. We'll have one other person look at it and make an absolute final decision. The other person looked at it apparently and was like, no, this has been deemed a gross whatever. You're permanently banned from LinkedIn. So even if I went and created another account, I waited a while. I was like, fuck them anyway. Then I decided, you know what? I'm going to go in and kind of feel out the situation again. I went in and created another account with my handle, which I consider my brand. And I immediately banned again. Like anytime I post anything that got any sort of like circulation, a comment that like if I appeared on the radar, I was immediately and permanently, that account was immediately and permanently banned. So it's like, wow, I was taken out of the discussion. And what I was doing ultimately at the end of the day was I was questioning the narrative just like I'm doing right now. And that's what ultimately I think they didn't want. And I sensed it towards the beginning, and now I feel like that's where the evidence points me, is that these social networks wanted to create echo chambers, and they did a pretty damn good job at that. And I wasn't perfect. I was crossing lines, I was stepping on toes, I was doing all this stuff wrong. I'm not saying I was in the right and they fucked me over. The thing was is there was no communicate, there wasn't even that minimal communication. I understand, I read a lot. Like I said, I teach, not teach, but facilitate an anger management group, and I'm constantly within the software engineering world, within just the startup world, whatever. I'm constantly reading and familiarizing myself with like terms of service, what do you call the policies? Have to actually open it up and look at it and see. Can't recall the name of this simple thing after I spout off how I'm pulling rank or something. Like etiquette and professional manners right here in this book for the anger facilitation group. I have a little pamphlet that I printed off PDF I found on the internet, which is out of a nursing handbook for school, and it's etiquette and professional manners. So like if anybody within the anger management group has a question on like what proper etiquette might be, I just pull this out and this is my reference. And it's like, it's a little extreme. Like it goes to the point of saying like gum chewing on the job is not acceptable, but it's like there's only a couple things that are extreme like that. But other than that, everything else is just really solid, like really basic. Here, I'll open it up and read something like ineffective discussion bike shed. If you have identified a systemic issue, find a solution that works for you, implement, then post. Harsh, unproductive criticism is also uncalled for. Ensure that your topic poses a specific question and be open-minded to responses. If possible, provide a solution or partial solution. So it's a constructive way of asking a question, not just saying, oh, like, defund the police. It's like actually come with evidence, show some possible solutions and stuff. It doesn't have to be fully hashed out, but at least show that you have some drive and direction, right? That type of a thing. So, and that's a code of conduct. That's the term I was looking for, like, some type of code of conduct and everything. And then there's another one I need to read in my hand right now. It's called the STAR method, about situation, task, action, and result. It's how to say things without babbling and rambling on like I always do. Okay.
Yeah. Florida. You're gonna ship them out to Florida?
Maybe that too. This can be, one of the revolutions that we have not taken advantage either in schooling or in mental health care or rehab is personalization. Everybody's different. Like there's some people that people that would be great on a fire crew, working on CAL FIRE. Other people, could be helping other people to get into recovery. So we can do all those things with a centralized system.
Oh, sounded so good till he said centralized system. It was like, yeah, help. The problem with centralized is the creepiest word, right? The only other creepy word is decentralized. Because guess what? Inside of the word decentralized is the word centralized. You can't escape it. The agendaists want to bring a centralized system. That's like the worst thing, honestly. And we all know it. We all know it. You know what I mean? This is where blockchain, I'm deep down inside, I think most people probably don't know it on the surface, but I'm somebody who had a little bit of a head running start on it because for various reasons I got into educating myself on what Bitcoin and blockchain and all those kinds of technology, what that was all about in the early days. It felt like I was way late into the game, but I was only like a year after it came out, maybe, so if even that. But I read into it, whatever. Oh, okay, this sounds cool, right after the bank shenanigans and all that kind of stuff, right? Political shenanigans in 2007, 2008. And it's like, okay, this makes sense. I'm on board with it. Like, I felt like this is a good idea. Of course, I'm not going to be like all in. Think I was homeless at the time or whatever. Maybe. I don't know. I definitely 2007, 2008, I was actually working. That was when I was doing the family thing. But yeah, right after that, I went homeless, and that's when I feel like that was when I first like was thinking about blockchain really. So, it seemed good on paper, or not on paper, because if you actually read the paper, then it doesn't seem good, but it seems good on spiel, right? On elevator pitch. So you hear, oh, especially back then, it's anonymous, it's decentralized, all this bullshit, bullshit. For one thing, it's anonymous depending on who you ask, right? Because if I just show you like some hash code serial number thing, it's like, do you know who this is? No. Okay, then it's anonymous. Like that's the argument they're going from. But in the sense of that's an identification of a transaction that took place at a location with a camera possibly at it, or with a computer at an IP address, or with a terminal machine, whatever, like that's an electronic digital thing, and there's lots of logs. And there's lots of logs about the machines that are logging the first thing to begin with. Like there's logs of the logs. There's just backups of those logs. Like there's so much freaking data, you know what I mean? From all angles, whether it's a freaking spy satellite or whatever. So here's the thing. Then so I start considering those types of things like, I'm not really seeing this anonymous thing the more I look into it over the years. And I tried not to look into it. But then people would come along, just that one guy who kind of heard about it kind of thing, and put it back in my cycle again. Like, hey, I signed up for this. Why don't you? And like, oh, okay, I'll go click this thing that will mine me some free crypto since you pressured me into it, whatever. I was doing that years ago, before Coinbase or any of that crap existed. And anyways, I started doing that, but I would never really get into it. And then somebody else would come along my way and say something. It's like, okay, I'll take another peek at where it's at and everything. Well, gradually, with all the peeking and poking, I'm writing software for people that are trading Bitcoin and stuff like that. And this was when Bitcoin was still, I don't know, the last time I remember checking the price before I did that it was at 600 and something dollars. And then I started writing the code, and then the whole 2017 thing happened while I was coding. Um, yeah. So I was in the thick of it during all that time, and that's when Coinbase came to be and all that kind of stuff. And then I tried signing up with them, and I'd already got on a couple other little exchanges and da 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 da. I had my feelers out in the waters, and was becoming very familiar, and I'd felt the greed thing hit me, and I was mining on crappy old laptops and computers that they were like, don't even waste your life even trying to install the software and mine on these, right? But I did it anyway, and that pocket change that I mined on those over just a few weeks or whatever, because of those big upticks in the market, turned into hundreds of dollars. It was trippy. So don't ever let these mainstream people tell you anything. And the ironic thing is I never got to any of that money. Long story short, like they ended up boom, 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 closing in, turning off the lights down the hallway towards me, kind of thing of like, I did not get that money. So, and now it's down to like 20, I don't know, whatever amount of money. Who knows? Maybe it's back up to hundreds again or something. But in order to get to that, they want like me to do this impossible photo where I have to hold up a legible sign in front of a smartphone and take a picture of me from front, side, whatever angles, like a picture of my butthole after sexual gender transition, whatever. They're just crazy. Like the stuff they want is like so much biometric data. I'm like, I don't even give my fucking bank or the DMV or anybody this biometric data, and I already feel like I give them a little bit too much. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm not playing. I right there, I'd already seen it coming, and at that point, I was like, you know what? I see it. This is the new world order. This is them trying to fill some biblical narrative or something of like you're not going to be able to buy or sell without a mark. And it's like you have this system, it's a blockchain, anybody could get shut down. They were already starting to entertain the idea of blocking out certain wallets or whatever, that have been deemed to be hacked or whatever. And it's like, really? I thought it's supposed to be that we're not, they don't have that control. That sounds like we're going from a quote unquote centralized bank system that's really whatever, you know, it's not even completely centralized. It's mostly, right? But it's not completely, to a fully centralized system. An undoubtedly singular blockchain. Yeah, it's replicated on maybe up to a billion computers, millions, hundreds of millions of computers, whatever, across the world. But at the end of the day, it's a singular ledger. That's what it is. You could call it blockchain, whatever you want, but all you got to do is go get a regular piece of college ruled paper and start writing down that. And write, Joe pays this guy $5. You know what I mean? Da 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 da. There's more nuance to it than that. The way the transaction works isn't exactly a one-to-one with what I just described with the notebook paper. But if you look at it like that, if you do everything but write low-level code for the blockchain, you'll be fine. You know what I mean? It's a freaking that's effectively what it is. It's just like an old school ledger that we used to do on paper, and now it's digitized, which they were already doing in banks, but now they're doing in this thing that feels public. It came to us on the lie. It's not anonymous. It's not taking out the banks. It's not decentralized. The only thing that's decentralized is its like its what do you call it? Its persistence. So if that's like a bank saying, "Oh, we're decentralized now because we're keeping a copy of your bank records at another location. So we're decentralized." And you'd be like, "Bullshit." You're still, I don't give a fuck. I'm glad you're backing up my data, but that doesn't mean you're decentralized. That means you're backing up your data. You know what I mean? You're still central. As far as I care in my mind, other than if this building burns, that one won't. Other than that, conceptually, it's fully centralized. If my number changes here, it's changing there. And if it doesn't, there's a problem and you're going to figure it out. So that's central. You know what I mean? If the blockchain burned down and there was only one computer left on the network, that would be the authoritative source of information. So the only way to violate that is to have the 51% rule with the blockchain, right? And that's to have 51% of the computing power. And then what you can go and do is slowly but surely start reverse engineering the last few blocks cryptographically, and then you can rewrite them. Or you could just literally start at some point, some arbitrary point along the chain, and just start re-signing those blocks, like as if we don't know what you're talking about over there. This is the way it should be. And if you have 51+% control of that network, all other nodes will automatically turn and look to you as an authoritative source, because that's how it works. That's the way you prevent a small clique of people from coming on and saying, "Hey, it's open source, right? We went in and hacked the code, and now you guys are going to start believing us." In theory, if all the code plays out like it should, that's not the way it works, right? And of course, there's little adjustments that get made over the years. But that's another thing they do, is they do this whole open source thing. And I'm sorry to go off on a tangent on one hand, but on the other, I'm not, because this all abstractly applies very directly. They say open source. That's another thing, like the decentralized thing, where it's not true. I mean, it is open source. You can go look at open source code that's Bitcoin, whatever, miner, wallet, whatever code. And when you look at that code, for one, most people probably aren't going to understand anything. But if you did get somebody in there who understands it, and the longer code bases survive, they, instead of doing what they ideally should, is become more and more readable. It tends to go the opposite way. But anyway, let's say it's the most readable code ever. You find a bug, you make a fix. Okay, let's say they accept your bug, which doesn't always happen in all open source projects, but let's say they do. They're like, "Hey, thanks for the fix," right? Well, now you're getting a little braver. You start getting comfortable with the developers and the community, whatever you want to call it, and you decide, "I'm going to add a feature," right? Well, what makes you think they're going to take your feature? You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to happen. I'll just tell you that right now. Oh, they're only going to listen to who they want to listen to for who drops those features in that software. So you could try all day. It's just, it's not going to happen most likely. Maybe it does. Prove me wrong. But the thing is, that's where the notion of open source, it's like, oh, they're just going to listen to me. I can just contribute. I can see everything. And it's like, nope. Okay, so that's there, right? Prove me wrong. Go contribute a feature. Go push a feature to even one they want. That'd be hard enough, but I think they'd take it. If they're asking for a feature specifically and, you give them the right interface and all that, they'll probably take it. I would imagine they'd be stupid not to. But if you go in and try and make any draft like, hey, I'm trying to be, make the world a little bit better place and I'm trying to do that, yeah, not going to happen. They control it. So that whole, when you see them tossing around it's open source, at the end of the day, the other half of that is they compile it. So you don't know what they're slipping in at the last minute when they compile it. It's just like Google Chrome browser, or I mean any browser's open source nowadays that I know of. But if it's not Firefox, there's a 99% chance it's based on Google Chrome's browsing engine, which is open source. Anybody can use it pretty much. Well, the thing is, that's called Chromium. That's my browser that's open right here on the left side of the screen is actually Chromium right here. So there it is, Chromium 96, 2022, right? The Chromium project. And you can see it's like Chrome, almost. It's what Chrome's made from. That's what Chromium is, right? So this is the open source project that Google does. And then at the last minute, so to speak, they take the code and they brand it Google Chrome, da 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 da. And now Microsoft with their Edge browsers now doing the same thing. They're taking Chrome, Chromium, and they're editing it, right? Why was I telling you all of this? I guess it was just the point of that you can't get your fixes in or everything's open source. I don't even know. But just trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Actually, psych, don't trust me. Never trust anybody who says just trust me.
Really good centralized system. And the other key ingredient that we don't have is professional assertive case managers, where somebody is tracking your progress. If you're arrested or you overdose and you go into rehab, before you get out, there's a plan for you so that you don't just go right back on the street and start smoking fentanyl and overdose and die or just become an addict again. There's some plan for you. And we're going to keep.
There's some plan for you. They don't fucking know what it is, right? That's what's so bad is it's like when it's an unclear plan, like we need a final solution. Look up the term final solution. You know what I mean? There's some plan for you. It's like, what is it? That's what we have right now. We already have abstractly what you're saying and it's not working. We already have police on the street, right? Let's go to a town that does have more police on the street. I mean, arguably it does count for something, but only to one half. How is that affecting the other half? Whatever. And who's getting sucked into that system? Who's getting sucked into that turbine? This plan needs to be concrete, otherwise I'm scared because otherwise it's these high or low bidders or whatever kind of people come in and who knows what. I don't want this vagueness in here. There's some kind of plan for you. Like, why aren't you already talking to experts? It's like you just want to be the guy. You're like a hammer looking for a nail. You just want to be the hammer. You know what I mean? Like, why are you a hammer? Why is there a nail? What are you trying? You're trying to fasten something? Okay, well, maybe glue's a better answer to fasten those two pieces of glass together.
Keep a close eye on you and make sure that you commit to that plan. We know that people relapse, but we can reduce that.
A close all-seeing eye. Like I said, I'm being negative. Obviously you could spin this positive, but the thing is this being put in the hands of government. Need I say more?
That amount of relapsing with a really engaged, good assertive case manager. And it may be that this is someone.
And if it's not being put in the hands of government, it's almost worse because then it's like a crony company, right? And they almost get away with the murder twice as much as the government because, like I've said before in some of my videos, I worked at a place that should have been the government's responsibility, but they subbed it out to private companies. And it just ended up a lose-lose because it's like, okay, here I'm doing a job that technically a government employee that's well paid should do, like even though it's a shitty job. Um, but since a privatized company has been given like a monopoly power over it, they can now pay me minimum wage, right? And that type of a thing. So you end up with the other extreme.
Who does have a potential to be reunited with his family.
And sorry, I shouldn't put that in such a selfish context. And for the customer, they lose as well because they, who are they going to complain to, this crappy company about the service and stuff that doesn't even care, that has no real obligation other than to just keep the lights on and the doors open, and versus complaining to your state or removing a politician or something if something's not going right. Like they're shielding themselves from a lot of that.
In Ohio. If that's the path, that's great, and I'll work with the governor of Ohio to get that done. I'll work with the Congress to
You're
make
not
sure
working
there's
with
Medicaid
shit.
money for that person to get fixed.
You might get one
and
thing with
repair
one
their
state.
life. But right now, there is nothing like that. And
He's talking about we're going to fix and repair, quote unquote, fix people, right? We're going to quote unquote fix people. Like that's a scary word, especially when you have no clear plan. And then the premise that all this hope is based on is that he's going to like secure all of these. He's not like, I already have the commitment from this standing governor right now. Like he's not even saying anything like that. Of course not.
and that's what Cal Psych would do. So in the emergency response,
Cal Psych. I thought he said Cal Site at first. And I was like, okay, Cal Psych. Yeah.
I give myself 2 years before we go back to voters. I'm going to put, as soon as we come,
Wait, what?
I give myself 2 years before we go back to voters.
I give myself 2 years. He, as mayor or governor or wherever the hell he wants to be, right? I hereby give myself 2 years. Have you ever heard that before? No, you haven't, as a matter of fact, but it happened, right? But they didn't even make that declaration. This dude, or at least who knows, maybe some people did. This dude is hereby, before he even gets into office, I guess you could, say he's honest. He gives himself 2 years before he asks the voters, how am I doing? Give me 2 years, right? The pandemic is now exactly at the 2 year mark, a little past, as far as, United States goes. So, he's wanting to do this all over again. He's wanting to turn around and do this, but he's saying 2 years. So if his 2 year, they said 2 weeks, and that turned into 2 years. So he's saying 2 years. Is that going to turn into like 200 years? I mean, if he just like got carte blanche and was able to just run off with his plan and it just worked, success breeds success kind of thing, like he says. I don't know if he says that later or what, but yeah, it's just wow. Thanks for showing us this whole thing for your plan to fix people. 2 years before you go back to voters. What did he say up here at the beginning? What did it say? Because I said I was going to say if he. Oh, he said this should only last for maybe a matter of months, but we need to be really careful about that, and we need to keep it humane. And then right here, like I said, in this last half, he's changing his narrative. Go back and watch this a few times for yourself, at least. I give myself 2 years before we go back to the voters.
I'm going to put, as soon as we come into office, day one,
go to
the legislature and be like, here's my legislation.
Soon as we get into office, day one, no discussion. I'm going to go to the legislator, the people that make laws, that stamp in the laws. I'm going to hand them this paper. Here's here's my legislation, man. And just pass that because, give me a fucking break.
For shelter first. That's the first thing. Shelter first, treatment first, housing earned. You don't have an entitlement to your own apartment in LA.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with him on that, honestly. But I just don't like these absolutist kind of things like that, even though I'm doing them. But I hope you at least understand that I'm doing this in the context of openly saying, zero deception where I'm coming from. If I say something you don't agree with or that's wrong, I'm telling you that I'm stating my own opinion and I'm not trying to force this on other people. I'm not even trying to be popularly voted to force it on, to enact it on other people or anything. You know what I mean? This guy is not admitting that anything that he could potentially deceive people or that he might be wrong or anything like that. I'm not feeling it.
You don't just get to go to LA and be like, hey, I'm a homeless drug addict, give me my own apartment. It doesn't work.
Right.
It's not ethical, it's not fair, and it's
Okay,
freeloading.
but if they do go there and then they don't work,
well,
they're
then
just going to be homeless.
if you can't, so we're going to enforce a statewide camping ban.
So where do you start? Venice? Like that's a good eyesore.
I mean,
right?
give me. I've got.
Okay, did you catch that? We're going. I don't know if he slipped with his tongue, and accidentally misstated it. He said we're going to enforce a statewide camping ban. Not, we're not talking about L.A. We're talking about the whole fucking state of California. It's illegal to camp in. Now, what are they going to do? Are they going to do like, not saying martial law, but almost feeling like that, kind of like COVID style measures where like, hey, check it out. You can't even recreational camp in the state because we want to make sure that everybody, that like that the people who are in the cities just don't go hide in the woods. We want to weed them all, smoke them all out, if you know what I mean, right? Give me a fucking break, you fucking Nazi dude. Wow. Wow. Sorry to call him that. You know what I mean? But it's just like, who the fuck else am I supposed to compare you to? Any of the other political fucking things that do that kind of shit? Like, what the fuck? This is creepy.
Got a little bit of time to figure out where we start, and
Right.
some of it will depend on politics.
Some of it, I think 110% of it, based on where you're coming from, is going to depend on politics. Maybe 111%, but no less.
Do you run numbers with anybody?
We're doing that right now.
Yeah.
We're doing that right now. Yeah, what kind of numbers are you running? What kind of numbers? I don't want to know. You don't even have your fucking numbers run.
So
Yeah.
it seems like it's going
We're
to be.
going to come in on my inauguration day.
He doesn't even have numbers, but he's got a bill. He's got law for day one. Like, this is completely in business. This is not the way you do things. You know what I mean? Hey, check it out. You hired me to develop your product. This is what's going to happen. Day one, I'm going to, like, you want a new web browser for the internet? Day one, we're going to come in and pick Google Chrome and all these browsers out of business. Okay? Oh, really? Do you have any numbers on that? We're working on them right now. Okay, you're going to come in and put a fucking established browser out of business with no numbers, day one. You know what I mean? You're going to have the plan day one. Not that it's going to happen day one, but day one, you're going to slip that plan. You're going to have the numbers by then, right? Are you sure? Are you sure you're going to have all the numbers you need? It's called Agile Methodology for Development. Look it up. Agile Manifesto. Kind of creepy sounding, but it's actually not so creepy under the hood, right? Anything with manifesto always sounds creepy to me. But it's basically, it's a thing that this century, if you, the thing like, what is it, the lean startup, all that kind of stuff, that all came from these people trying to do what's called rapid application development in the 90s. And that's where all these other things spun out of. And basically, if you combine that in the software industry, the 90s software industry with like the Toyota production model and sort of squish those two together, that's what you have. And it's a good, simple, relatively simple template to judge things against. And one of the good things out of that too is the 5 whys. Anytime there's something, you're going to ask why 5 times, and you'll probably get to the root of the answer. Usually by about the 3rd why, people are like, fuck off, and they won't answer. But anybody who's serious should be expecting the 5 whys. And so if you ask this guy, why on your inauguration day? Why? Why that day? And then, because we need it right away. We can't wait 1 second. Well, why can't, I'm just being hypothetical. He hasn't gone this deep in it, right? Well, why can't it wait, more than 1 day? Because there's this situation happening right now, and this person can't afford to lose $1 more, and we promised them da 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 da. Well, why can't they afford to lose $1 more dollar? Because this and that, and this and that and that. Well, why don't we set up maybe something like this, or then you could actually like propose an alternative, and then we could stick that on the wall and throw mud at it or whatever, try and like resituate it and see if that works, and then we can go from a place like that to start building up. Instead of just like, just get me in, don't ask questions, you can read the bill after it's passed kind of thing. Like, what?
With legislation that goes in front of the legislature and I'm going to take emergency actions as governor.
Legislation that goes in front of the legislator? You mean like food that gets eaten? Or food that goes on the plate? Okay, I see what you're talking about. That sounds good, man. That's a good spiel. Nice
Deal with the
clothes.
disaster. We can get FEMA shelters set up.
And we're going to deal with the disaster. So he's going to declare a state of emergency. He's got FEMA coming up. FEMA, who's already been stood up by the Trump administration. So if you don't know what stood up means, that means its gears are moving. Its blood's pumping. You know what I mean? It's not just this like office with these guys that kind of like show up and whatever, you know, or it's not on standby anymore. It's stood up. That means it's ready to rock. It might not be ready for any event, right? But it's ready to that steps out of the way. It's, you know, there's somebody there to answer the phone during business hours, so to speak.
Triage tents. We can get the national
FEMA triage tents. So right there you can see, picture what they wanted to do with COVID, you know, checkpoints and all that. All of a sudden you're going to have these triage tents where, you know, you're suspected of being homeless or whatever. And of course they want to start it out in the extreme areas like LA, and it will probably look really good at first. And the people will be really obvious that need the problem, that have a problem or whatever. But if it goes beyond that, it's creepy. I mean, look into what Giuliani did to clean up New York. In the end, a lot of people really like New York, but the tactics that went down were considered horrific by some. So as you know, I consider myself, I want to be a liberal. I'm a moderate. I have conservative values, I have liberal values, and I'm really strong with both of them as far as like, you know, I wouldn't say I'm extreme, but I feel like I, you know, I'm saturated in those feelings and stuff. So I want to have compassion for people on the streets, even if somebody or some situation, besides my own experiences, even since back in the day, it's like, why not give people the benefit of the doubt? That's the whole thing in the anger management group. If I could say the one takeaway in one sentence would be of that group, of the workbook and everything we do, is give people the benefit of the doubt. That's what it is. And even if they're totally wrong, you know what I mean? Even if somebody's like, hey, fuck you, like right to your face, it's like, you know what? That person had a bad day and I've been there. I don't feel like I could ever say that to somebody's face, but I remember a time when I said that to somebody who was a stranger or something, like I should just realize that person's still growing. Or that's just one example. You don't have to do it like that, right? But I mean, it could be anything. Or you could even say, you know what? They're right. Fuck me. Why would I even say that? Why would I say that to that guy's mother, his old elderly mother, when she's walking by? Why would I even crack a joke like that to her, you know? Like, rightfully so, he said that, you know? Kind of like Chris Rock. Like, I hate to even bring up that whole thing after that was just so blown out, but just the way that he kind of just stood there and sort of took it, you know? He made a couple comments, but I've been hit like that. I've been hit exactly like that before. And the way that good of a jaw punch, like, it doesn't look like it's, you know, like, yeah, it's a head punch and whatever, but the way that he got hit, even if that was staged, it looked like he took the impact. I watched it freeze frame, and I watched how he sat there and, like, at the last second did not pull his head back. You can't tell because the frames, like on the footage I had, the frames actually missing the swing so quick. But he, for the most part, stood there and took it. And what that does is that rocks your chin to the sideways. That's where the whole term glass jaw, if you're not familiar, comes from. It's this weird effect I never had happen to me until I was in high school. I was a freshman in high school, and my buddy just popped me on the jaw like that. And it doesn't hurt. It didn't hurt me anyway at all. Zero pain. But the way that it like pops your jaw and whips your neck at that angle to the side, it causes some effect that makes your legs noodle from underneath you, right? It can do that, and that's why it instantly can drop and knock somebody out. And it also can make you like super silly. You know, you'll kind of go dizzy for a minute, and you're punch drunk. That's where that term comes from. So Chris Rock looked like he was literally punch drunk, but he held his he held himself. I don't remember. Sorry, tangenting again.
National Guard involved if we need to in a strictly civilian capacity.
How many people do you need in terms of like counselors, police officers, law enforcement, just to handle the homeless problem? It seems like you need a team.
Oh, it's a huge. It's a great question. In many ways, there's sort of the institutional arrangement. There's where do you start geographically. There's how do you do the legal side? I assume we'll just be sued by ACLU. That's fine. We'll go to court over what we're doing. That's fine.
Wait, what? I assume we'll just be sued by the ACLU. That's fine. We'll go to court or whatever. That's fine. Like, I assume we're going to be sued by the American Civil Liberties Union. Okay, on one hand, in big business, honestly, big business is all about lawsuits. I'm going to be straight up right there, right? If you don't believe me, go look up the history of lawsuits between Oracle and Google and Apple and Samsung and all those kind of companies. They're It's like warfare. That's the way it works. Just like how we say, hey, you know what? As much as it sucks and as much as we want to find another solution, which I can promise you there isn't one, but they will try and sell you on one. The countries, nation states war against each other and all that because of their models and their systems. And it's not just capitalism, it's all systems. But that's the same way to look at this, I feel like, is like, okay, I'm sorry, that's not the same way. That's the way that we could say that this guy's looking at it. On one hand, is it's like big business, you're dealing with people on the streets, you should expect ACLU's guns to be pointed at you. I would think, yeah, rightfully so, right? But to just say that, I assume we'll just get sued by the ACLU, that's fine. It's like these are the things he's bouncing around. He's effectively letting out, I feel, bet what's been bouncing around in his head. So this is the little shallow entertainment he's done. Is he has no hardly any real numbers. He's expecting to get sued by the ACLU. That's fine. It's like that's also one of those things you leave unspoken. You know what I mean? You might be, that's like saying, I expect we'll get sued by somebody's family because, they weren't really a drug addict and we put him through this treatment and now they're dependent on fentanyl because it's so weird. They went in there for fentanyl addiction and then we prescribed them fentanyl, whatever, and it's like, just don't even go there. You know what I mean? You're like, if you can't even give this presentation, and not that I'm a shining example myself by any means, but I mean, this guy can't do it. I'm not even going to invest in this company that he's got. If he was presenting a company to me and I had $1 million to invest, I wouldn't even be like, and he was in office, I wouldn't even invest because I'd be like, dude, your plan fucking sucks. Like, you've got the power. Now what are you going to do? Burn the wick down? You know what I mean? Like, you're going to just spend the next 2 years, like, not even spinning the wheels? What are you going to do if your plan doesn't fucking work out? Otherwise, it's something where he's got a bunch of special interests, which I don't think this guy does probably. Maybe he knows a few people, but there are people out there who I think they have some pull with some special interest. And those are the scary people too. If they'll either claim they don't have a plan or they'll claim they'll have a very clear one. And either way, if they're backed by special interest, you could pretty much bet it's probably pretty clear.
And then there's workforce. And in some ways, the workforce is the most important thing. We're losing, both LA and San Francisco are short like 500 police officers at this point.
So, yeah, we tried throwing police at the situation before, so to speak. Doesn't work. It puts the police officers in a bad situation, right? They're in a situation where they can either, talking about extremes, they can either A, go in with the authoritarian thing, and that never is a good look, right? Or B, they can sit there and get pissed and spit on and just sit there. And that is basically what they did during 2020 for the most part. I watched a lot of footage. And I'm not a fan of the police. I'm not, even as an anger management facilitator, I'm not, I would rather have no job. Right now, technically speaking, I have no clients right now. I'm in a lull. There are a couple people onboarding and whatever and whatnot, but I'm fine. I don't need that money. It's nice to buy some groceries and stuff with it, but I can dedicate that time to other things. I can employ my skills other ways on a job. Like I've been doing this freelancing and online work for so long, you know what I mean? Like it's where I could even go get a local job. I work at the back of the house at a restaurant. I love doing that. I go do that kind of stuff from time to time. Like whatever, I can go do it. I don't have to work for the system. I'm not caught in it. The reason I do it is because I happened to have a good counselor back when I had my vacation, and I saw that and I saw there is a glimmer of hope for people. If you get the right person on that edge when you're, trying to like transition back out of the system, if you get the right guidance from the right people who tell you, hey, it's fucked, whatever, but here's some ropes, that kind of a thing, that makes all the difference in the world for the people who are really truly trying to like get some traction and get better at whatever they're doing. So that's where what made me think this opportunity's come up, I'm going to take it. You know what I mean? And if it turns out, if I feel like I'm just another cog in the machine, then I'll step back and bow out. And it came to the point where I was questioning that. You know what I mean? I had to, in the beginning, I had to crank it up and be like super serious and straightforward coming into the scene to be like, to make sure that stamp of approval was legit for people who made it through the program, that they really like sincerely had made a commitment and shown progress through the program and stuff. But then after that, it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's a lot of stress and friction on people too. So now I'm rolling it back to like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to continue to do this if I have to put that much stress and friction on myself and others. Which I'm exaggerating it a little bit, I think. I think it's just naturally going to be there, but I'm looking at it from that perspective. I'm looking at it from not like, oh, the system's fucked. If only they did this better, then I could do my job better. It's like, what can I do on my end? What can I do to do my part for everybody involved? You know what I mean? And everybody involved at the end of the day ultimately means the people who are coming through to talk to me. So that's what I'm all about. And honestly, that's all we need, No, like we just need effective discussion. And if we all just step back and realize what this whole game show's all about, it's not about the system. The system fucking sucks. The system's fucking broken. Okay, right? That being said, we need to figure out real solutions on our own, off the record, not on the public record so much, but not, not conspiracy, right? But on the down low, we need to keep having these discussions that with people that we've all been talking to over the years now, because we've reconnected. They tried to split us in early 2020, right? Because we were all coming together. Like it felt like spring of 2020. There was a little bit too much. We're not going to fall for this bullshit. So they're like, okay, pull the plug. So that's when they brought up the Floyd thing, all that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to say too much, but I'm just going to say the Floyd thing might as well have been a fabricated conspiracy, because that's the way it was worked, right? I'm not saying that it was. Maybe later. I'm not saying that the events leading up to it were, but that's the way that was utilized. And I'm not saying there's not problems. Where they draw the lines, they want to draw the lines at race, right? They want to draw it at, this is a black-white thing, look what's going on. And yeah, there's a lot of truth there. But in this country, it's just so much easier to see because of obvious reasons. But at the same time, the real underlying cause, there's indicators we can use besides color. Because the truth is not everybody who's black is oppressed, right? Who's in a situation maybe like George Floyd or something was. Not everybody who's black's like that. So if you speak to this quote unquote black community as if everybody's like that, that sucks, right? That's just going nowhere quick. But of course we can't act like there's no problem, right? So we need to look at, what are the real indicators? What's the real indicator that's going to catch the Asian that was mistreated by the police, or the white person or the black person or whatever? Not necessarily, we're not trying to be like, oh, we can't solve any problems that are, whether directly or indirectly being targeted towards black people because it doesn't fit every race. I'm not saying that, but that's the idea, that's the place we should begin from. Because if we begin from that place, then we're looking at truly systemic issues. They're throwing these things that aren't systemic out there. These are leaf nodes on the tree. These are end results. These are not systemic root problems. Police brutality isn't a systemic, like, I'm not saying, police brutality, is it or is it not a systemic problem? Like, do we have it or do we? That's not the way to look at it. You know what I mean? It's like the stuff that's on the surface is not the systemic problem. That's the end results. You know what I mean? The systemic problems are buried way down below the surface. You got to get down into the trunk and down into the roots and stuff like that. So that's where you see those kind of things. And what we need there is construction. You know what I mean? You can't just be like, oh, the tree's fucked. Let's start with the bare ground. Well, how do you know a tree's ever? We need a tree. Like we're birds, we need a tree or whatever. Why? How are we going to guarantee that tree's going to grow? Oh well, we'll put water money. We'll put water on it. Well, you're going to dump money on the problem, but what's going to sprout? What do you think the chances of a good, solid, robust tree that we're going to like better than this one is going to sprout right there? I'll give it a 50-50. Is a 50-50 good enough? Not in business. Not in business. 50-50 is too risky. You take a 50-50 chance, you're going to break. If everything you do is a 50-50, at best, you can only expect an average, mathematically speaking, to break even, right? If anything goes wrong, you're going to lose. So people want 51%. If you can give somebody 51%, now you're talking. Because mathematically speaking, if you can show evidence and logic and all that and make somebody feel comfortable with the 51% number, tell them that story behind it, then they're going to go, okay, I believe this. And if this person's telling me what's true, 51% of the time I'm going to win. So if I invest $1,000,000 at the end of the day, I'm going to win. I'm going to win a little bit or a lot or whatever it is at the end of the day. I'm not, most likely, of course, anything could happen, but most likely I'm going to break even or win a little bit. So that's the thing is we need that 51%. A 50-50 is not good enough. And even a 51% is like we really, ideally, we want 2/3. That's just where it's at, roughly speaking, right? About 66%. If you can give us that, then we're like, okay, now we're really game. Now it's not just like 51% in the long run, we should win, long-term fundamental investment, whatever. Now we're talking like almost like day trading with less risk. Like 2/3 is like, yeah. Anyway, so let's stop thinking about these 50-50s where they get us to attach our own personal pipe dream synergized with theirs to think this is going to play out realistically. You know what I mean? Because it just doesn't. Look up the word utopia on Wikipedia. Um, it comes from a fictional story that's based on this exact type of scenario, more or less, where at scale you're selling somebody a potential paradise, and at the end is a dystopia, is a very non-paradise situation. So if you look, these paradise situations are for the nobility, they're for the rich, they're for the privileged. Not that those people didn't work very hard or whatever to maintain those positions, but people like Joe Rogan, like, oh, Joe Rogan's going to he'll consider moving back to LA maybe if they go in and fix it like that. Then maybe he'll come back because maybe he doesn't like being buried in Texas with a bunch of people that make him truly look like a liberal. Because you know what? Joe's almost borderline soft in Texas, right? Probably not, but I mean, he's moderate in Texas. Um, in LA, I have to imagine he was like, they're probably behind the scenes like his friends, like, hey, Joe's kind of alt-right a little bit, isn't he? Like, so I know what that's like. I know what that's like, but I was the opposite because I was in California and I was more like a moderate. I'm not so much politically, but just younger in lifestyle and stuff. Like, I was way more of like what you might describe as like a passive person. And then I come up here into Oregon and I'm way more leaning like if anybody, they probably sense like this guy feels like he could get aggressive if he had to. And I wouldn't blame him for feeling like that. That's totally in California. You got to carry yourself. I mean, look at this situation they're talking about. Like, you had to carry yourself like that. You had to back your shit up, or everybody knew they could just bend you over and butt fuck you. So you got to like, you have to back your shit up there, and so that people don't think you're a pussy. That's just all there is to it. Your house get robbed day and night, like all that. So you let people know, you give off the air that if somebody comes around here this questionable, they're going to get a beating. It sucks, but and even in California, like I said, I didn't want to be that guy. That wasn't how I was naturally wired, but I felt like I had to toughen up. And so even I just toughened up enough to where it's like, I still didn't feel like a tough guy there, but moving out to other countries, I did, or other states, I did. Even when I wasn't trying to be. So I think Joe, it's sort of inverted on him. He probably felt like the tough guy in LA, felt like a little bit of a king of a hill. Now he goes to Texas. He's starting to feel like, the queen of the queen of the anthill, maybe, or something. Who knows? Whatever. But if he wants to push his so-called what he thinks is liberal weird politics, go back to LA. I don't know. Don't fuck up Texas. But I'm not saying Texas is somewhere I'd want to live. That place is pretty red. He's in the liberal area, but I do know that Texas is just it's super conservative, you know. I don't even with me retapping into my conservative values, I think I'm as bizarre as Oregon is with their whole mandates, and then you see all the people surface that are like, I don't know. For 25 years, I considered myself hard left. When we came back here, I was like, we're going to this coffee shop because this is the liberal coffee shop. We're not going to that one up the street because those are conservative snobs and all this stuff, you know. And I still like the coffee shop we went to, and it was a liberal coffee shop for sure, still. But at least it was grounded in some reality, you know. And it turns out the place up the road that I thought was conservative, I think it's liberal too, but it's just that neoliberal tier that almost comes across as like what I traditionally consider conservative. Because I figured liberals are liberals, are like, we shouldn't have any money. We're liberal. We give it away. We have no excess. We give away our money, and we'd rather give away to a community that's going to turn around and support us as well than to hoard it all and keep it for ourselves, abstractly speaking, right? That's the liberal ideology that I subscribe to. Like, I'd rather have little and everybody have something. So that's the way I've lived life, but and I just kind of like blindly assumed that like everybody I could just look around and the other liberals were the people not too far from my situation, you know, but come to find out there's a lot of really some of the richest people in the world are quote unquote liberals, you know. What does Bill Gates identify as? Bill fucking Gates identifies as a liberal, you know. My impression of being liberal wasn't like if I were to go feed the homeless people, I would just do it donation style. I might write it off on taxes. Yeah, sure. You know, why not? Why not? Like whatever. I'm not going to try and act like I'm too goody two shoe for that. Like, yeah, of course, if you can take money and direct it where you want and the government legally allows you to take that off your taxes and say, "Hey, I chose where this portion of my tax money is going to be spent directly." Cool. Yeah, definitely do that. But if I were to feed the homeless people, aside from that, I wouldn't be like, you know, how could I make a few bucks off of this? Like, okay, maybe if I invest in this company and have them supply all the cups at lunchtime to these people, then that's just, to me, that's dirty. That's not something I want my paws in. I want my paws in that just to help people. Just so, and I'm not just to feel good. I hate it when people say that because it's like, what? That's not selfless. If you're doing something to feel good, you might be saying that as like a automatic response, but to be selfless is to do something when it doesn't feel good. That's selfless. When you get, you know what? I really wanted to buy something with this $5, but I gave it to that person, and I still feel a little hit my gut because I really wanted that $5, and then I saw them turn around and buy booze, or they had a needle hanging out of their back pocket, or whatever. You know, like it's like that's selfless when you give that person the money. You know what I mean? Anyway, I love whoever watched this. Thanks.